Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, a production of Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. On this podcast, we'll talk about the local businesses in Ottumwa to give you the backstory to their success. We'll also talk about the economic initiatives that are driving the progress of the community, and we'll talk about the issues that the community faces and much more. So stick around and let's talk Ottumwa. Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, the new podcast brought to you by Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. Today we're joined in the studio by the Newcomer Relations Coordinator for the Ottumwa Legacy Foundation, Andy Maw. Welcome to the program, Andy.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, the reason that we have you here today is to talk about a new initiative that's coming out in Ottumwa, Iowa to address probably one of the more critical issues that we have in the community, and that's housing. And just to give everybody a little bit of backstory on the housing situation in Ottumwa, we have arguably one of the older housing inventories in the state of Iowa. We also have one of the lower property tax valuations in the state of Iowa as it stands right now. I could be off just a little bit, but I believe it's like 86% of our housing stock is built before 1979. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yes, it is. We do have an older housing market than most, even towns our size.
Yeah, and one of the issues that we do have in looking at bringing new workers to Ottumwa is the fact that it's really difficult to find a house in the city of Ottumwa, especially if you're looking from a certain price point, that price point that's, say, $200,000 and above, which really is becoming the price point that a lot of people that are moving, especially for some of the more professional jobs, that's where they're looking at. They're also looking at open concept homes, which really don't exist in this community just because of the age of the homes.
Yeah, and that's kind of the world I live in with my program, the Welcome and Connect service. I get to see these folks as they're visiting Ottumwa, and we get to have conversations about what they're looking for housing. And you're absolutely right. That is what you described is what people are looking for, and that type of housing does not exist here. I have a couple that I'm working with right now that are getting pretty stressed about it because, their price range is that $200,000 range. And, when you're looking at the older housing stock that we have, there can be a lot of issues that people typically don't want to deal with when they're spending $200,000 for a house. So it's a struggle, and we're hoping we can find something for them. But otherwise, people have to live in a different community and commute in.
Which clearly we don't want. We want to bring those people to Ottumwa. We don't want to make it a stressful situation for their family to have to commute every day. That, and we really want to retain those dollars here in the community. So looking at what are some of the solutions that we as a community can drive for, the Legacy Foundation took on an initiative here very recently called Mission 500 that I'm sure people that are listening have probably at least seen a little bit about on social media. Will you go into detail about where Mission 500 concept of it started and what is the mission of Mission 500 and where you see that going in the next year or two?
Sure. So back in 2021, we started to do a housing study. It hadn't been done for a number of years here in Ottumwa. And it's important to do that, even though we know that we need housing. The idea is to find out what type of housing are we missing. And if there are grant monies available, we need to make sure that we can apply for them, and having an up-to-date housing study is essential for that. But with that, while we were doing that, the study has shown that, yes, we do need housing in all different price ranges and sizes and whatnot, but the key goal was to have, I think it's like 497 housing units, but it's so close to whatever it is, it's so close to 500. We just rounded it up. We need 500 dwelling units by the year 2030, and that is a mixture. It's almost evenly split between rentals and owner-occupied units. And so that's where the whole name Mission 500 came, from that 500 units by 2030. And so that's what that committee is trying to do, try to set up the conditions to promote the development of housing in Ottumwa.
And one of the things that I think is really important to note here, you mentioned that we do need across all price points housing, and we need various types of housing: the single family housing, the apartments, the condo style houses. One of the things that we've heard a lot of people say in this community is, nobody's looking for 200K plus houses. I don't know why they're focusing on that. And sometimes they're looking through a lens that, it's their own lens. They're not looking for $200,000 houses. So clearly nobody's looking for $200,000
Right.
houses. That's been one of the misconceptions that's really kind of hurt the city of Ottumwa in the past few years, and trying to make initiatives come forward that would actually get some of that housing, because the perception in the community is that we don't actually need that.
Yeah, and like you said, when you don't need it, yeah, you don't think about those things. Again, in my world, I see it all the time. I can think of 2 physicians right now that have recently left the community. They were here, and one of their struggles was these 2 that I'm particularly thinking about was they never found a place to buy. And it wasn't for lack of trying. They were looking for housing, but it was housing that wasn't available. Now, and why they left, there's probably many different reasons, but it's hard to keep somebody in an area when they can't even find a home. Sure. In their community, so the notion that it's not needed is incorrect.
Looking at your day job, how many folks do you actually give tours to on a normal basis?
Oh, wow. I think pre-COVID, it would average out to maybe 2 a week. And where I'm at right now, COVID's still kind of lingering. John Deere has now recently given the go ahead to start doing tours again. So I'm going to see an uptick with that. So I'd say I'm about like 1.5 a week, on average.
And just to put this into perspective for our listeners, of those 1.5 to 2 a week that you're doing, how many of those potential Ottumwa residents do we see an issue with the housing specifically?
It's tough to say, because just because I see them doesn't mean they get a job offer.
Sure.
And so I can't say specifically on that. We do keep track of I do keep track of the topic of conversations that we have, and just do a blanket report, so I can keep track of some statistics. Doesn't have their name tied to it, but what are some concerns that they have? Is it crime? Is it housing? Is it education? And housing does come up frequently, just from things that they have seen, things that they have read, and just even from talking with the potential employers themselves. Sometimes our employers don't think about the things they say, and they can give a negative perception on that, which gives them fear immediately, which then we have to try to help them overcome. But so there is a considerable amount that express concerns about that. One story that I like to share recently, and it's one that I found out since I started working on this housing component, was my parents actually visited Ottumwa in 1979. My dad is a teacher and had a job interview here, and then he also had one in Muscatine, and he had the opportunity to go to either one. And he told me that back in 1979, his concern about coming to Ottumwa was housing. He didn't feel like there was an adequate housing supply for him to find something that he needed here.
So that's been a concern for a while, quite obviously, and I think anybody who's lived in Ottumwa for any period of time really can see, that we've not progressed much. The Ottumwa City Council, Zach Simonson, had made some comments about the number of new builds that we've had in Ottumwa, and the permits taken out are almost non-existent. So what have been some of the barriers to getting developers here in a community? I know that gap financing has been a real struggle in the Ottumwa community. So can you go into a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, the builders here, just from talking with them, they feel it's a risky investment, because again, there's a lot of speculation that I'm going to build this house and that I'm going to try to sell for $250,000, and I'm not going to sell it. And unfortunately, we have seen a couple builders that did build a house like that, and it took them a little bit to sell, but there were other things involved in that. It wasn't necessarily the house. You got to look at the neighborhood that you're building in and those type of things too. Then also just the cost, of land, the cost to put infrastructure in. It just comes across as a big risk for them, and they have to put out a lot of money from the beginning. And so we got to take a look at what we can do as a community, what incentives that we have, at our disposal from a city perspective, to help mitigate some of that, whether it's, making land available that the city owns at a much better price, those type of things. What type of gap financing is available and those things.
And do you see that that going forward in any way at this point?
Yeah, there's a few things that are out there that I kind of want to be careful about talking about because it hasn't been approved, but there are some things that, I know the Legacy Foundation is talking with the city about some type of finance option, some type of monies for the development of new homes in our community. And so if something like that does go forward, again, it just lowers that risk a little bit, and we can hopefully start seeing some development. We truly believe if we find the right location, which are some areas that are being looked at, and have the right incentive package that's easy for people to understand and easy to access, we can start seeing that happen. And I feel that if we have one or two go up and they sell real quick, which they probably will in these areas that we're looking at, there's no reason why we shouldn't see more want to get on board with that.
And, this is one of those areas when we look at it, it's not only important to bring people into town that we have this housing, but just from a general taxation perspective, getting these new houses up really is important, because the more new houses we can get up, the more tax base that we have, and actually lowers the tax burden for the people who are current homeowners in town, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If we get more homes built in Ottumwa, it just lowers the amount that we all have to contribute. It may not actually drop your taxes, but it may lower the rise of it.
Exactly.
And I think we have to look at that because just things cost more over time, and so taxes are going to go up. But if we can reduce the increase, that's still a benefit.
Yeah, and when you look at the some of the sister cities to the city of Ottumwa, they have well in excess of $1 billion in tax base, and we're looking at the city of Ottumwa, who has roughly around $680 million. We're falling behind a little bit on that, and obviously that's a direct result of the lack of new builds that we've had over the past few years. That plays a huge piece of that.
Yeah, it does. And, so we got to figure that out. And there's a lot of empty lots in Ottumwa, but with some of our city codes, you can't even build on them anymore. And so it's nice to see that the city council is looking at these proposed code changes, so that way these lots just don't sit there forever, that they can a builder can actually grab them, take them, and put something on it. There's also a proposal out there, I think it passed. You can help me with that, about doing some prototypes on some medium density and some market rate housing. That's another part of the finance piece, because the developer has to pay to have that engineered, and by the city doing that and having these prototypes available, they know that they can build this house and it's not going to be a problem, and so it takes some of that fear out too. And so by changing those codes, having those prototypes available, we hopefully can see more of that infill lot development. We're also working with our nonprofits to make sure that they're aware of each other and what they're doing, can share ideas, and even potentially target neighborhoods where there's multiple empty lots, or if there's multiple dilapidated housing, if they want to refurbish them and bring them back into the market. So that way they can start turning neighborhoods around collectively, which has been exciting to see, them working together along those lines.
So you're mentioning some nonprofits that have come to the table. Has this been pretty accepted by the business community and those people that do have the ability to affect change in Ottumwa?
So just from talking with the for-profit entities. Some will say, well, they're my competition. But then I've had others say no, because they hire me to do it. So they're taking the risk, but then they're giving me some work, to do, and I don't have to put all my monies into this right away. So, I mean, it just depends on who you talk to on that. I would hope that they would see that these folks are bringing neighborhoods up, and there are lots for sale in those neighborhoods that they're working. And by we have one area of town that just got a Homes for Iowa home, and Habitat for Humanity just did a home, and then there's another lot available that Rippling Waters is going to do a Homes for Iowa home. And so all of a sudden you got one street that has 3 brand new homes in it, and that can start bringing pride to the neighborhood, making it more a desirable neighborhood. So if there's another lot there and you're a developer, take it, build a house. You have a better chance of getting more money out of that sale because of the nicer neighborhood that it is becoming.
Yeah, there's the old adage that success breeds success.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, kind of scoff that off just a little bit. But in the housing market, that's an absolute truth. You have your neighbors that are spending money on refurbishing their homes. You have people coming in, putting brand new homes in. That really lifts the valuation of everybody in that neighborhood. So, and then it also allows for a little bit of neighborhood pride, and people can really start to see some of that grow after time. I look at communities like Oskaloosa, for example, who's been doing that for quite some time now, and it's working. You can see it in action now.
Mm-hmm. And when the Homes for Iowa home was being delivered, I ran out there just because I wanted to see it, in action. And despite the rumors, it did not fall off the truck. I know that was all over social media, but that did not happen. While they were, doing what they do, neighborhood was out there, pulled out his folding chair, and just had a conversation with him about, the development going on in his neighborhood. And it was neat to hear him, give his perspective about, the positive changes going on. And then he started talking about things he needed to do on his property. And our nonprofit groups talk about that consistently. When they start doing things, the neighbors start doing things too. And so, that's a great way, by having these groups do this work together, to start bringing pride back to neighborhoods. Ottumwa's got the Blocks to Neighborhoods program, which really drives that, getting neighbors to work together to do projects and, make their neighborhoods a nice place to be.
Going back to the name, Mission 500, you're talking about 500 homes in 10 years, is that right?
Yeah, by 2030, and it's 500 dwelling units.
500 dwelling units. Thank you for the correction.
Because that's important, yes.
That's a very aggressive number. How do we attain that?
Well, the Bonita project's going to knock out 108 of them right away. And so, that's going to bite off a big chunk of the rental piece of it. But how do we attack the actual home ownership part? It's finding those areas where we can build in a community. We talked already about the infill lots. That's got to be a component of it. But then also taking a look of, these areas that could be built on that we just haven't. And then setting up those conditions, to spur that development, and also bringing people to the table and having conversations with them. I know Zach has been having conversations with a few developers recently that are interested in building. And, we need to support that as a community, because we don't have the developers from outside knocking on our doors saying, hey, we want to build housing here. We need to look at the local guys that care about our community, that are wanting to see that positive growth, take place here. People want jobs, well, we can't have jobs if we can't put people in houses.
Which I think that is a very important point to bring up. One of the things that you hear when you walk around the streets of Ottumwa is, we need more jobs. We need more jobs. And we absolutely do need more jobs. We need more business growth in the community. But to have successful business growth, there are a few important pieces that you need to have in place. You need to have a good education system. You need to have a safe community. You need to have good child care for people to send their children to while they're at work. Probably more importantly, you need to have a place for them to lay their heads at night and a place to raise their children in. And if any one of those components is missing, it's going to be really hard to attract new business to the community. And right now, this is one of the critical areas that Ottumwa is battling, has been battling, which is really, if you take a 50,000 foot view of Ottumwa's economy over the last 15, 20 years, has really been one of the sticking points for the growth of the community is where are people going to live?
Yeah, I mean, you talk to JBS, they have, tons of jobs available, but they have no place to put them. And those people are coming in and making a good hourly wage, and I think sometimes people don't understand that, the people that are coming to work full time at JBS, they make too much money to be on government assistance programs. They're making a good wage and they're contributing to our community, and they need a place to stay.
Yeah, that's one of the fallacies that I've personally heard in conversations with people in the community and looking at JBS specifically. People have this assumption that they pay low wages. They're one of the better paying jobs in Ottumwa. A lot of their folks are coming in off of the street making over $40,000 a year. Typically, you have both people in the family that are working at JBS, especially when they're coming into the community. So you're looking at $100,000 nearly or better for that one family unit, which in this area is an incredible wage.
Yeah, that's good money. That gets you many places in Ottumwa.
Yes.
So, so we got to have those homes for that growth, and to make us more appealing to other businesses that want to come in. If we can't house the people we have, it's hard to get a new business to come in and bring 100 jobs here.
Where do we go from here as a community? How can the community help in making sure that Mission 500 succeeds?
Well, I think we need to be supportive of growth opportunities. It's easy to be that guy behind the keyboard, downplaying any possibility of growth in a community. We need to take a look at it and see the opportunities and embrace it and support it. We have to realize that we only have so many arrows in our quiver, I guess, to address these things as a city. And so I know some people don't like TIF, but hey, what else can we do in some cases? And so we need to look at supporting that when it makes sense. And then, take a look at what we own. Are we taking care of our property? What can we do as a neighbor, a good steward of our neighborhood, to make sure that that our houses are looking nice, our properties are kept clean, and bring that up. I think that's a good start as far as a community. As far as the city goes, I mean, we need to be aggressive at seeking out those people that are interested in spurring on that development and having conversations. And then when we get to like a roadblock where, we don't think that we can make this work, let's talk about why and see if we can come up with some solutions, as opposed to just writing it off and saying, well, I guess it didn't pan out. We can't do that anymore. Right.
It hasn't worked in the past. No. We have a very long history of showing that mode of thinking does not work. And one of the things that I'm really proud of in the city of Ottumwa over the last probably 10 years or so is they've taken a much more progressive approach to building the community, looking at Main Street, being very proactive in the growth of that area, which we have seen building of the tax base. We've been able to put new housing units up in there. We have seen new businesses come in as a result of investing in the Main Street district. So all of that combined, it just shows that being a progressive community actually does work. And this, to me, is just one more area where we need to step away from the old adage of, if we just sit here, things will happen, because it's not. It's
No.
not going to happen if we don't take a very proactive approach as a community and do everything that we can to make sure that we're getting people in the door.
Yeah, I mean, and I believe in the free market and letting that do its thing for the most part. But in regards to housing, it's not working here, and so something's got to change. And so, like I said, I firmly believe in having conversations. If you have an idea, let's talk. Let's just talk. It doesn't mean we're going to do anything. It doesn't mean anything, but let's have the conversation and see where it goes, because something's gotta go. Something's gotta move forward.
So what's the next steps for Mission 500?
So wow, so there's a lot of things in play with the finance component, and so we're and we talked about those earlier, with something that the city and Legacy is potentially working on with the prototypes and whatnot. But the next thing is, once we get those figured out, getting that in a place where we can market it. That was one thing that we heard from contractors is like, yeah, I don't have time to look all over the place and go to this building, that building, talk to this person, talk to that person to figure out what my incentives are. I need that pretty clear cut so I can look at dollars and cents and make a decision. And so we got to make that simpler. And so we have a marketing group, within that Mission 500 committee that has been talking about what does that look like? Is it a website? Is it, is it just a page on a city website? What is that? And how can we get that information out to the public so that way it's easy to understand? So that's for me, that's a big component that needs to come next, because that also makes it easier for us to, if we can't get local developers, which we want our local developers to do it, but gives us something to reach outside and maybe bring somebody else in by having that simplified and ready to go for them. So I think that's a big component. There's also some interest in having like homeowner education, some sort of that component to help people understand what homeownership is and how easy it is to attain. I mean, it's a lot easier than people really think. And so there's an appetite to work on something along those lines. And then even trying to make people understand the process of what it takes to have a house built. Part of our problem is our developers are afraid to build a house without having a buyer right away. Where if we can find people who would be interested in having a house built for them, then it's not as risky, because the developer's like, I got this guy here who wants to buy this house, so I'm not going to have a problem selling it. I already got a buyer. So if we can find those people and connect them with the builder, I think we can also see some more success there.
Okay. Well, Andy, thank you for coming in today. This has been a treat, and hopefully everybody that's listening is energized just a little bit in the future of the Mission 500 project, and we start seeing new houses come up and see some new neighbors come into Ottumwa.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode of Talk Ottumwa.